At first, I was saying, well, don't worry, you're not going to get big. There's no accidental muscle mass. If you're building muscle and you don't like the way you look, which has happened never, like no client ever has said that to me, then we could back off. But I realized, wait a minute, that's actually not the right response. Look in Amazon and there's Skinny Bitch, there's, Tiny and Full. There's one book series that's like bigger, stronger, leaner for men, and the women's is smaller, tighter, leaner. And I go, oh my God.
Take up less space.
Right. Our whole lives, it's like, be smaller, be skinny. No guy ever is like, I want to be skinny, ever. And this is what we've been fighting our whole lives is this. And I go, I think it's time for you to take up some space.
Hello, my Betties, and welcome to another episode of Better with Dr. Stephanie. It's me, your host, Dr. Stephanie Stima. Today, I have my longtime friend and mentor, JJ Virgin, on the show. This is her second time on the show, and we are talking all about health and aging powerfully, 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. So we are, as you might expect, very aligned on many things regarding exercise, physiology, and muscles and diet. And so we talked about that. What are some of the changes that women see in their 40s and 50s and beyond in terms of their body composition changes? What are some of the strategies that we can use to rectify them? So we talk about resistance training. We talk about the difference between strength and power. We talk about diet. We talk about cardio. We talk about yoga, flexibility, and pliability. We talk about supplements. We talk about Ozempic. We talk about absolutely everything. JJ is such a joy. And if you haven't heard of JJ, I'll just read you a little bit, just a snippet of this woman's accomplishments. She is a triple board certified nutrition expert of fitness, and she is a fitness Hall of Famer. She's the author of 4 New York Times bestsellers, including The Virgin Diet, The Virgin Diet Cookbook, JJ Virgin's Super Impact Diet, and her Super Impact Diet Cookbook. Her book, Warrior Mom, 7 Secrets to Bold, Brave Resilience, shares the inspirational lessons that JJ learned as she fought for her son's life. And that's actually what we talked about the first time around. So if you want to have a listen to that, we'll have the clickable link in the show notes. This is a conversation between friends. I hope that you will pick up on our mutual respect and love for each other. JJ is very well spoken, and I think you're going to share this far. And if you find value of it, share it far and wide, write a review, tell me what you're thinking about in terms of the value that you got from it. So please enjoy my conversation with JJ Virgin. Dear friend and mentor, JJ. Long time. Welcome back.
Good to be back. I wish we were in the gym.
I wish we were in the gym.
I think that should be the new podcast. I really do.
Working out at the gym. We were just saying in the pre-chat, we should just be arm wrestling.
Okay, true story. Someone who asked me to come speak at their event, a guy, he's like, at the end, he goes, I didn't know, it was going to be a gun show, right? And I said, want to arm wrestle? Totally joking.
Yeah.
And he took me up on it. And in the middle of this arm wrestling situation where we were tied, I go, you realize you are in a no-win situation, because if you lose, that's really embarrassing. But if you beat me, then you're the mean guy.
Right.
So we just better call it right now.
Call it
I'm
a tie.
Save you.
Take the tie.
Yeah.
JJ, I've known you for years. We had you on the show a couple of years back when you were talking about mindset and having resiliency in the face of trauma. And you had detailed a lot of your own story with your son. And now you have passed the 60 mark, looking as fabulous as you always have. You've always looked great. And I wanted to have you on the show to really talk about, we talk a lot about some of the same verticals in terms of meals and nutrition around muscle preservation as we age, what that means. And then, of course, how that translates into mental resilience, how that translates into cellular grit, how that translates into a better life. So I thought we might just start with some of your philosophical premises around aging powerfully. I know that that's something that you like to talk about, and maybe we'll just start with that word. So Why do we not want to age gracefully? And why do we want to, I love the way that you talk about aging. We want to sort of shift that to aging powerfully.
That came to me, and I'll tell you, it's kind of a bigger idea, and I know you'll get this. As I started to talk about, building muscles, we age, and this has been my thing literally In high school, I was working out with the football team because there were no gyms back then. So I was in with the football team, me and the guys. And then when I started in college and I paid my way through college and grad school as a personal trainer when there weren't any, that's what Mark Siss and I were laughing about, is like we were the first ones with Body by Jake and Tony Horton. I realized very quickly that if I wanted to get paid as a personal trainer, I had to get results. And if I wanted to get results, it wasn't by having people do loads and loads of walking. It was getting them into the gym. That I was going to change what I called their bank account. All of a sudden, it's like they had a better credit rating, more muscle if I got them into the gym. And so this is I'm very excited about what's happening now. And, shout out to our buddy, Dr. Gabrielle Lime, for really helping getting this out there, and Dr. Mark Hyman and Peter Attia, everyone getting this muscle idea out there, which is so important. But here's what I noticed. I started talking about building muscle, doing creatine, and putting on more muscle. And what do you think the number one thing I heard, especially around creatine, is?
Oh, I don't want to gain. I don't want to hold water. I don't want to get bulky.
I don't want to get big, right? Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And at first, I was saying, well, don't worry, you're not going to get big. There's no accidental muscle mass. If you're building muscle and you don't like the way you look, which has happened never, like no client ever has said that to me, then we could back off. But I realized, wait a minute. That's actually not the right response. Look in Amazon and you'll see this after we hang up. There's Skinny Bitch. There's, Tiny and Full. There's one book series that's like bigger, stronger, leaner for men, and the women's is smaller, tighter, leaner. And I go, oh my God.
Take up less space. Be tiny.
Right. Our whole lives, it's like, be smaller, be skinny. No guy ever is like, I want to be skinny, ever. And this is what we've been fighting our whole lives, is this. And I go, I think it's time for you to take up some space. What if you got big? What if you got more powerful? And as you look at it as we age, and you talk about this a bunch, love your podcast, is we lose that fast twitch. Yes, we lose muscle, but we lose more strength, and we really lose that power. And that translates into everything we do in life. And so the real takeaway message is, you're going to train to get better at life and to be stronger and to be more powerful. And hopefully, because of that, you can show up bigger in your life. And so let's not back away from that. Let's step into, if we can't show up more powerfully in our life right now, when the heck are we going to do it? At 90?
Yeah.
That's my rant.
No, I love it. And I think, let's just put this bulky, I love accidental muscle mass. It's like, that would be my dream if I.
Right? I know, we're killing ourselves in the gym. And they go, here's the funnier part, Stephanie. I don't want to get big. I just want arms like yours. I go, well, let me tell you what it takes to have arms like
Let me tell you what these arms lift. Yeah.
Like what I did today with the battle ropes and the pull-ups and the burpees. And, it's like, free dips. It's not accidental.
Oh, yeah, I think, and the other thing that I think is a misnomer, and we'll get into this as we sort of move through what it means to build muscle in your 40s and beyond, is bulking doesn't happen in the gym. It happens in the kitchen. Like you can.
It happens on the couch.
Exactly.
It happens on the couch.
It happens on the couch. It doesn't happen in that. We just don't have. Certainly there's always going to be that one person, the one out of the 100 that's like, more androgenic, very much has a propensity to put on muscle mass. But even still, it's, I know I've had Lane Norton on the show, and he talked about this idea of, it's like thinking that you're going to get bulky from weight training is like equivalent to, driving your car, down wherever, whatever city or town you live in, and thinking that you're a NASCAR driver. It's it just not going to happen. And I always quote him because I think that's such a funny, it's so true. It's like, you just think you're going to you're going to drive up to the gym, or you're going to buy a pair of barbell, dumbbells or whatever. And then you're just going to be bulky. You're just going to put it on. It's, weightlifting is a game of centimeters and inches over many, many, many decades. So,
but there's more to it too, Stephanie, when you think about it. So you're building muscle. However, right now, someone not exercising at all, they've got poor quality muscle, their ribeyes. When you go to the gym and you start building muscle, you're going to shift from a ribeye to a fillet. So all of a sudden, your muscles may get bigger and stronger, but they're still smaller because the fat infiltration has gone away. So you've shifted from being a ribeye to a fillet, and then that muscle is metabolic Spanx that holds everything in tighter.
That's a great way to put it. Metabolic Spanx. Yeah, I
Metabolic,
like that. I love that. I love that. Talk to us a little bit about fast twitch. So this is something that I'm very interested in as well. And who doesn't like to look at PubMed for hours on end reading about fast
right?
twitch and power loss as we age? I know that you certainly have done the work. So talk to us a little bit about and I love how you talk about the difference between speed and power and strength training. So I'd like to actually contrast those, but first I think a pre-frame is important as when we are sort of defining fast twitch type 2A and B fibers versus our sort of slower twitch fibers.
Yeah, and now it's A and B have switched names, so it's now X. So basically, and what I don't want to do is get so in the weeds that people are like, "Oh my gosh, what do I do?" But there's a bigger vision here, so you'll understand that if all you're doing for training is walking and doing things like yoga, things that are focused more on slow twitch muscle fibers, actually, as you age, you're going to end up slower. So because our muscles respond to what we do. They're very adaptive, which is awesome and not awesome at the same time. So we have two types of muscle fibers, slow twitch and fast twitch, and then we have the ones that can go either way. So if you're doing a lot of fast twitch, those ones will move more into fast twitch. If you're doing a lot of slow twitch, they'll do more slow twitch. And you only build the muscles you actually work. And again, so we know that if we want to build fast twitch, we have to do explosive, powerful movements. Slow twitch, we don't need to worry about. We're using them all day, every day. They're really our stability muscles. They're keeping us upright. They're helping us walk, stand up, do slow things. The fast twitch is something that you have to do with, heavy weight or speed to move quickly or to move something that's really heavy. And when you think about strength is defined by what you can do one time. So what's that weight you could lift up one time? Power is how quickly can you do something? And then endurance is how much can you do, how many reps of it can you do. To build muscle, you're actually going to get, if someone doesn't want to get big at all, they could just focus on building strength and they won't have as much hypertrophy. Hypertrophy happens much more on the side of doing more reps, more sets, whereas strength is going to be short sets, longer rest periods with sets. So as we age, we know we're losing muscle. We tend to lose more fast twitch than slow twitch. If you look at it, in fact, I was just looking at some research that Dr. Peter Attia had put in his newsletter about gait speed, and somehow they did gait speed with monkeys going upstairs. I'm like, how did they do this study with monkeys going upstairs? But basically, they were showing that the rate that you could go up the stairs was a very good correlation of all-cause mortality, just like we know VO2 max is as well. And so fast twitch, how fast you move, your gait speed, how fast you can walk is very well correlated with all-cause mortality and longevity. And when you think about it, like the ability to get up the stairs, get out of the way quickly to shift is what's going to protect us from falling, helping moving away from something. So you can train for hypertrophy, you can train for strength, you can train for speed. And there is some crossover with all of those, but I think what we really need to focus on as we age, once we've gotten a good foundation in, and I've been really focusing on what is the perfect program, because I know every single scientist says, oh, it's nuanced. I go, that's not helping the population who goes, what do I actually do? It's just like, what do I eat and how do I move? And I think once you've gotten yourself doing activity where you've really gotten yourself focused on your 8 to 12,000 steps a day, step one. Step two, you add some intensity a couple days a week to those steps. There was really cool research that just came out that showed that people who walked 8 to 12,000 steps a day, they compared two groups. And the group that 3 times a week actually put speed in for 30 minutes had changes in body composition, waist circumference, blood sugar. So just doing that, like throwing on a rucking vest or going on hills or adding speed in, to something you're already doing can make a difference. Once you've done that, you start doing your resistance training. You get dialed in with the basics, the foundations, the movements, the form. Then you start adding in some power and some strength to really start to focus more on fast twitch. Sure, you'll pull fast twitch in all the resistance training you do, but when you really start to push what's called high velocity resistance training, it's going to hit it even more.
That is so great. And I think for many of us, myself included, part of the way that I paid for my schooling was I was a step instructor, high, low, Taibo, like I did
Hmm.
all of that stuff. And so many of us, especially women who are now in perimenopause, menopause and beyond, postmenopausal, we sort of grew up in the cardio room, right? So I love this stepwise approach that you're outlining because a lot when now we're hearing lift heavy weights. And so many women don't have that neuromechanical integrity. They don't have that brain body connection, let's say, to go and put a barbell. Like any personal trainer with their salt would say, someone new to the weight room, the first thing you're not going to do, you're
Right.
definitely not going to put a barbell and axial load this person and tell them to do one of the most, technically complicated movements in the gym, right? So I love what you're talking about with like weighting with a rucksack. I just got a rucksack from Go Ruck, no affiliation, just heard Michael
Mhm.
Easter talking about it and I was like, all right, I'll take one. I had 25 pounds the other day. We just go for evening walks after
25
dinner.
pounds you started with.
25, yeah. I
You're a
actually have
beast, man.
yeah. And I was like, so I have 2 plates. I'm gonna try tonight. I'm gonna go for I'm gonna see if I can handle 50 for our walk. But
Wow.
walking is it's like such an easy way to step up the intensity. And then
Hmm.
I love what you're talking. And then you get into the gym and then you start some training. Maybe you start with a machine where the arc of movement, the motion is already defined for you, and you sort of work through the stack, get a personal trainer, get someone who can evaluate your biomechanics or your individual sort of, compensatory patterns that you might have, and then work your way up to the barbell, work your way up to the deadlift, work your way up to all these things. And then we can, and then as you said, and then bring in the power because that's
Yeah.
really, and there's, I got to say, I have a lot of like in the spirit of sort of honesty and transparency, I have a lot of like mental inertia with power,
Ugh,
but
right.
it's in my schedule every Tuesday morning. I'm doing sprints. I don't even, that's what I do. I get on the bike and I just do my sprints and then I go
It
for,
sucks. I
it,
mean, it sucks.
it
So,
sucks
it,
before, but then afterwards you're like, I did something hard and I did it and I got
right.
over it, you know?
And
Yeah.
now I can do hard things in life.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
here's the thing, you don't have to do it. One day a week, I think is great. So, like today, I ended up working out at home and I have battle ropes. I have a sprint treadmill. I did snatches. I did burpees. I did sprint treadmill. I did battle ropes. I did an exerciser. Did I love this? Afterwards, I felt like I was a badass. But during what I do is I have a board and I write down what I have to do and I get to check it off. And that's
And you just got back. You were traveling, right? So is that another sort of
I always travel.
a strategy maybe to sort of get you back on the right time zone, kind of get you back into your regular routine? Is that something that when you're traveling, do you make sure that you try to find a gym when you're traveling to sort of set yourself in the city or the place that you are?
Yeah, so I have because we now travel about 80% of the time and we're always flipping time zones, I have very specific strategies to be able to pull this off. The one thing I always make sure of is that we check what the gym situation is everywhere, and we choose hotels based on gyms. Now, sometimes I went on a tour to Bali on a spiritual pilgrimage last summer, and so I had no say over that, and so I brought a TRX with me so that I
Oh,
had
nice.
something with me. I brought bands and a TRX. And here's the thing. It's amazing what you can do. You can do squat jumps. You can do step lunges. You can do burpees. Are they fun? No, not fun, but you can get these things done. So I have the things I like to do when I'm home or at a gym that's got everything. And then I've got my kind of ace in the hole in my back pocket that I can always do anywhere, which you could in a hotel room literally do push-ups, burpees, dips, step ups. You could run the stairs. You can do squat jumps. You can do soccer sit-ups. So you can always find something to do. And then I'm crazy about tracking my steps. So
What
that
is a
is
goal? What is a step goal is it that 8 to 12K that you're going for?
Yeah, my minimum. So if I have a crazy travel day, like I'm not the person on the airplane walking up and down the aisles. I will not do that. That actually makes me a little annoyed. I admit it. But I'm always making sure I'm walking through the airports and getting the steps in. Minimum's 8. I really try to get 12,000 or more. And my goal here at home after dinner is to go out and walk. Now, I will tell you, like my ruck invest right now is at 10.
Nice.
So I was like, oh
That's
my God.
awesome. Yeah.
But I think for everybody listening, a ruck invest is such a great investment. And you can get one that can go, you can start at 5, go to 10, go to 15, go to 20. And what's great about it is it's also great for bone density.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's another thing about, and this whole conversation is like, what do we do after 40? Because it just seems like everything tends to, I think you notice your health is not the same that it was when you were 20 or 30. There's something about the decade between 40 and 50 where you're like, all right, I'm either going to invest, as you were saying, in my lean muscle mass, I'm going to invest in my power, in my strength, or I'm not, and things are going to go down. And one of the things I'll say is even through your 40s, you can still kind of get away with not doing. I mean, I'm not recommending it, but you can still kind of get away with it. But then there's such a precipitous drop off, I think, in your health that happens. And humans tend to think very linearly. It's like, well, as I improve, it'll just look like this. And
Mm-mm.
your degradation is exponential. I think you literally just fall off a cliff at some point where all of a sudden chronic disease catches up with you. You've lost your breath. You have no strength. You don't have the ankle mobility or the foot mobility or the hip mobility that you once had. Your shoulders frozen, and then and then your sex hormones are, they've said sayonara, and then, you're sort of in this stuck place. So
And it doesn't have to be, though. This is the
yeah.
important thing. I think the thing that happened, we talked about mindset. I was talking to our buddy Mark Hyman, and he said, if you have a positive mindset about aging, you live 7.5 years longer. And I was like,
Mm.
okay, well, that's easy. I'll do that. And I got so fired up about turning 60. And I always like it when people tell you what you're not able to do, like what you can't do anymore and blah, blah, blah. And that it
Yeah.
gets me like the minute you tell me I can't do something, you know what I'm going to do. And I know you have the same
Like,
personality.
say it again.
I was like, oh, you can't be as strong at 60? I'm like,
Yeah.
really? I will
Yeah.
tell you I am leaner and
Yeah.
stronger. And now this is from someone who started lifting weights at 16 in the high school gym with the football players. I am stronger in my 60s than I was in my 20s. I am leaner. I am at my lowest body fat with my most muscle mass. So it's like, and I'm doing it purely to prove a point. But I will also say that I wish that in my 40s and 50s, I had paid more attention to two things: more power exercise.
Mm.
I wish I'd put myself through that pain. I got so into the weight room. Like I would happily, and I know you're exactly the same way, I would happily go in and lift weights all day long.
Uh, every day. Yeah. Yeah.
Totally love
Mhm.
it. Now, you asked me to throw in kettlebell swings and burpees. I'm like, ugh,
Mhm. Mm.
but I wish that I forced myself to do more of that during that time. I was doing structured HIIT training, but I didn't make myself do the big stuff. And the other thing that I wish I'd done, and so this is all part of when you really look at what do you want to do so that at 70, 80, 90, you can do all the things you want to be able to do. I think yoga needs to be in there. And I I'm the person that goes to yoga class and watches and goes, "Okay, I'm 10th of the way through. All right, I'm a 20th of the way." I count every minute and I'm doing the math all in my head about how much I'm through it, It's like, yeah.
And you get
But
the shavasana and you're like, I did it.
I know, I've never regretted it. I posted the other day, I've never once regretted getting my butt to the gym, getting myself to yoga class, never once regretted it. And all you have to tell yourself is, I'll just go. I'll just go show up. I can always leave if I want, because you never do. You always end up doing your thing. But, we tend to not think about balance and flexibility and stability. And yes, you can put a lot of that in when you're doing free weights, but boy, having to do like crow pose, and that kind of, and warrior 3 and these types of things is really challenging. So I am big time. I think that yoga should be something you factor in once a week.
Yeah, and I think it's so reasonable, and and what you're saying, because we're talking about power and strength, which are sort of two maybe distinct verticals, really, when we're thinking about the exercise cocktail that we all should be engaging in, and then we'll get to cardio in a moment. But I think that flexibility, pliability, and then of course the proprioception that comes from that, the warrior 3, you're not really,
Mhm.
especially if you're sort of reaching, you're not really looking at where your arm is going. You're just kind of figuring out what's happening there. I think yoga is important. That's something that I've recently taken up. I always had a general, like you, I'll
Mhm.
lift weights every day, all day, baby, like no problem. But, just noticing wanting to keep that mobility and that flexibility and that pliability, that capsular stretch that I can get in the joints.
Yep.
So started doing some hot yoga. I don't know if I can count that as zone 2. I'm gonna ask, that's a question I have for you. Can I count it? Because I'm sweating like a mother in those
I
hot
don't think
yogas.
so, but I think we get too blown out about these things.
Yeah.
When you really look at what you where you wanna excel in all of these things, and we're doing all of this ultimately to be able to be better at life, right?
Yeah.
So that's why we're doing it. But
And
then
to
you look
age
and go
powerfully to your
and to
like to
age
your point.
powerfully,
Yeah. Yeah.
to hold on to those fast twitch muscles. That's why I think of powerful, and that's where I love this concept of high velocity resistance training where you work, 1 day a week, you would do, say, 1 to 6 repetitions, 4 sets, about a 3-minute break, but you are doing and this is where you're probably gonna be better off in some of the moves using machines, unless you have a spotter, like, I'm not doing a chest press without a spotter as powerfully as possible.
Yeah.
I saw someone at Gold's Gym once drop the bar on their chest. I never need to ever test that one. But, doing something fast and hard 1 day a week, to really push the strength and power side of the equation, or 1 day a week doing your HIIT training, but doing your HIIT training in a way that really pushes the power in multiple different planes and doing rotation. I love to do wood chops and then doing side lunges and then doing straight jumps. Like, what are the different things that I can push my body through that we did when we were kids, mountain climbers, side planks with raises, stuff you would never do now unless you had someone yelling at you in a class to do it,
Right.
right?
Right. Right. I love that.
Oh, another one, Stephanie, that has totally helped. This is how they say you don't wanna ever be the smartest person in the room?
Yes, find another room.
So,
Yeah.
yes,
Mhm,
in the
mhm.
gym, I never wanna be the youngest person in the class. So my goal always is to go to the class where I'm like, the grandma in the class. And literally, we go to a HIIT class that has one side of the room are sprint treadmills, and one side of the room is our stations with TRX and kettlebells and plates and a step bench and bands. And you do all sorts of horrific things, right? But it's 50 minutes and in cycles, and we are literally the oldest people in class. I mean, I look at it and go, "Not only could I have given birth to you, I could have given birth to you and your kid," is now my grandkid. So,
Right,
do
right.
that.
I think I love that, and I think what I'm hoping I remember thinking watching the Super Bowl, it was a couple years ago, and J-Lo and Shakira were the hosts or the halftime show,
Mhm.
and at the time, I think J-Lo was like 50, 51. Some I don't know her exact age at the time of the show, but it was like early 50s. Shakira was like mid 40s, and I remember thinking, this is what I wanna feel like when I'm 50 and when I'm 40, to have that mobility in my hips, to be able to get on a pole if I so choose, to be able to dance my butt off if,
Mhm.
for the time and with that intensity. And, I've always had weights as a part of my life, which I know is a little different than, other 40-year-olds where we like I was saying, a lot of us have sort of grown up in the cardio side of the gym when we actually went to a gym. I remember competing in fitness, like a, figure competition in 2000 before I had kids. So it's always been a part of my life in some capacity. But for women who are just starting out, who may have been the cardio bunnies, what are some, I know you've been talking a lot about action items up until this point and giving some really specific examples, but if someone is, let's say she's 48, starting to feel, perimenopausal, hot flashes, she's not feeling herself, that central ectopic fat distribution, so we're starting to get that adiposity through the belly, what would be some exercises that you might, or what would be a beginning step for her? And I'll kind of segue this into diet as well, because I know that this comes up in your world a lot
Yes.
too. Yeah.
This is what it literally has been waking me up throughout the night, is really nailing this exercise prescription. And again, because, you'll hear from all the different scientists and no one wants to say, "Oh, just do this." I keep hearing, "Well, it's nuanced. You could do all these different things." I go, "Yeah, but then people do nothing." And again, as I go through this, I think the very first most important thing is to know your numbers, especially since we women get so weird about the scale.
Yeah.
And I say that including me. We all do. We all like, and when I decided to get in the best shape of my life for 60, I actually put muscle, gained weight on purpose at first, because I was like, okay, first thing I'm going to do is put on a little bit of muscle and not focus on losing fat first. So I actually upped my calories a little bit, put on muscle. But the reason I didn't go crazy with it is I was using a DEXA and a bioimpedance scale to measure all of this, and I knew what my goals were. And whatever we're doing, whether it's our exercise or our diet or, supplements, you always design these things. They're tools for what you're trying to do. I would assume for most of us, we are looking at two different things that we want. We want to hold on to or build muscle. And I would argue for any woman, your goal should be to build muscle.
Yep.
I think that it is like having your IRA. This is the goal, is to put on as much muscle as humanly possible so that as we do start to lose it, we have a higher reserve, right? And it's not easy to do anyway. Like 1 to 2 pounds of muscle a month is a lot. And the closer, the fitter you get, the harder it is. So, you're holding on to or building muscle while you're dropping body fat. And the first thing you do is you have to know what that really looks like. So you go get a DEXA scan, and then you come home and you have a bioimpedance scale at home and a Bluetooth tape measure. There's a Renfo product. It's $30. And you track your weight every single day to see your total body water so that you can monitor what's shifting and take the average over a week. Because if you look at your weight every day and try to get estimations based on that, you'll make yourself crazy, right? Because it goes up and down and up and down, but you average it over the week. And you want to see your total body water going up so that you're holding on to or building muscle as you're dropping fat. And then you do once a week, you do a waist and a hip. So you're doing a waist to height measurement and a waist to hip. So you're monitoring your metrics, because what you monitor and measure, you can improve. And as we know, like I had one client who came to me who wanted to lose 10 pounds, who was a skinny fat. She was 25% body fat. Her BMI, I think, was like 19 or 20. She did not need to lose weight. She needed to change what that weight was made up of. Took about a year for her to put on 10 pounds of muscle, drop 10 pounds of fat, dropped down to 18% body fat, 2 clothing sizes, and crazy enough, Stephanie, she was upset she didn't lose 10 pounds. She looked entirely different. Like she looked amazing.
I have to still unwind this in our
Yep.
beautiful women's minds. It's
I
like
know.
the scale matters. And we have other things like non-scale victories. I'm so happy that you said waist to height. I actually don't hear that a lot. We hear waist hip, which is important,
Mhm.
0.8 or less. Waist to height, 0.4 or under. I really love that as well, because for the tall girlies like you,
Right?
waist hip,
I'm like, wait a
sometimes
minute.
yeah.
Why should I
Sometimes
have the same waist measurement as someone 5 feet tall? I'm 6 feet tall. Come on.
right.
So yes,
right,
waist
yeah.
to hip, waist to height, do both of those
Mhm.
so that you can make sure that the right things are shifting. So that's step one. And then you get used to monitoring that. And you take a very curious approach to the scale, not a mean girl approach,
Mm.
a curious approach, so that you can start to look and see what's working. Oh, do I need to increase my protein? Oh, so you'll be able to tell if your resistance training program is working, or maybe it's not, and you need to actually do some bioidentical hormones or check your thyroid, right? So that's step one. Step two is, again, just to track your activity level and make sure you're getting the 8 to 12,000 or more steps a day. Step three is to add that intensity in. And there's actually some cool research showing that people who focus first on getting their cardiovascular intensity up some before they start the resistance training actually have better results getting into that resistance training program. So then the next phase is, let's get that resistance training going. And in my perfect world, you would hit each body part at least twice a week, 3 times a week, I think, especially as you're starting out and want hypertrophy. I'd rather see that. And I've divided the body into 4 parts with a focus on 3. So upper body pushing, things like push-ups and overhead press and dip, upper body pulling, a pull-up, a bent over row, hips and thigh hinging, so squats and deadlifts and step-ups, lunges, and then power core. And in my world, if you're doing push-ups, if you're doing squats, you're actually doing your core. So I don't get so crazy about doing core work. If you want to do some in between your sets, but I'm more focused, like get yoga in once a week, and I think we're going to be fine. I've got a 6-pack and I don't really do much core work. I do core work all the time because I'm doing push-ups and burpees and all sorts of stuff. And I love
My
to
abs
start.
get sore on back day.
Right. I mean,
My
think about it,
Yeah.
right? They get sore playing, if you're
Yeah.
doing like push-ups correctly, you
Right.
will get sore on these things. So how do you use your core the way your core is set to do? Because your core is set to hold you upright, to stabilize you, right? So if you're doing all of these exercises correctly, and that's why, hypertrophy has been shown to be the same whether you use machines or you use free weights and cables. But the reality is, to me, that's like arguing all calories are the same. It's like, okay, it might all be the same, but there's a big difference between a leg press and a squat in terms of what you're recruiting, the metabolic cost of it, and then how functional it is in life. In life, there's not many times I'm doing a leg press, but there's a whole lot of times I'm doing a squat. There's a whole lot of times I'm doing a deadlift, right? There's a whole lot of times I'm doing an overhead press. So if we can get people doing more free weight style activity, my goal is to do that because if you can do it well in the gym, you're going to reduce your risk of injuring yourself in life. And, people talk about getting injured in the gym. That's not normally where people get injured. People get injured in life.
Right. How does a woman know if she's working hard enough? So everything that you're saying, I love. Another question that I often get from my community is like, how do I know how hard I'm
Yeah.
working? And so often, and we look at the studies and we look at, there's a lot of idea around, it doesn't matter if it's 5 to 7 or if it's 15 to 20, as long as you're approaching muscle failure. And of course, when you look at the perception of muscle failure in women and men, and I
Mhm.
think this is gender agnostic, when they look at it in the lab, it's like we are often stopping way before the
Yeah.
3 reps in reserve kind of thing. So what are some of the cues that you're looking for either for yourself or with the women that you've counseled for knowing that you're working hard enough, knowing that the set mattered. It's a working set.
Yeah. First of all, are you increasing muscle and are you getting stronger? Ultimately, those are the ultimate changes. Can you open the jar? You know, I had a freak out a couple of years ago because I was always the jar opener and I couldn't open a jar. And I didn't think about it. I handed the jar over to my husband. Then I went, I'm the jar opener. Hold on. I don't want to get to the point where I have to use that rubber thing to open the jar. I want to open the jar. That's grip strength is a proxy for overall strength. So are you getting stronger? Are you going up on weights on those exercises? And is your muscle mass increasing? Now, building muscles like watching grass grow. You already alluded to that, right? 1 to 2 pounds of muscle a month. And that's why we have to be able to monitor it.
God, that's a lot. A month?
1 to 2 pounds when you're first starting out, if you get to where you and I are, if we could possibly gain a pound of muscle in a month, it would be a freaking miracle. But we're
Wow. Yeah.
at close to our genetic potential,
Yeah.
most likely.
Mhm.
There's ways we can increase right now, as like we can add, and we can talk about this in terms of strength versus power, add more sets, add more reps, add more weight, add more exercises. But to start with, you're monitoring your muscle mass and you're monitoring your strength. And then within your exercises, you're like, am I improving in my exercise? Did I get to the point and I love to think about 2 reps in reserve. And so I think the only way to get there is to push on machines as hard as you possibly can until you can't do another one. And check in and go, can I really not do another one? Because usually you can do another one. You just don't want to do another
You
one.
just don't want to. Yeah. It hurts.
Now,
Yeah. Yeah.
when you think about how much to do and when you're starting out, I still think now, when I was in graduate school, it was 3 to 6 was strength and 8 to 12 or maybe 15 was hypertrophy. And now all of a sudden it's like 6 to 30 reps is hypertrophy and 1 to 6 is strength. And so I think for time efficiency, working in the 8 to 15 range still works really well. I always say if you can't get to 8, lighten the load. If you can get past 12, make it heavier. Take about 2 minutes in between, do it again, and do multiple sets. And just keep trying to push to the point where you feel like, God, couldn't really do another one. Form's always the thing that makes you stop. That's the most important piece of it. But if you're someone who it's funny because people get nervous about getting big, so they do more reps. But actually, when you look at hypertrophy, you're going to hypertrophy more likely from doing multiple sets of 20 reps than doing multiple sets of 3 reps. So, strength is not necessarily commensurate with muscle size. So if you're worried about injury or you're just coming back, you can always do blood flow restriction or do lighter weights, more reps. You just have to get to that point, whatever you're doing, where you feel like you really couldn't get more than 1 or 2. And I think the best way is the minute your form starts to go is really the place you stop. You don't eke out a rep with bad form. You'll see people do it, especially the dudes, do it at the gym all the time, right?
Yes.
Those bicep curls that are really just back curls. I'm like, your arms didn't move at all, but your back just arched all the way back.
I see this all the time on the leg press, and I have to hold my tongue because there's 400 plates on the leg press, and then there's 5 degrees of knee flexion.
Yeah.
Like the knee just
What was
bends
that?
a little bit, and they're screaming, and everyone knows that they're on the leg press, and it's
Mhm.
like, now nobody has plates because you're on the leg press
Yeah.
for, whatever. Okay.
And then they don't take the plates off.
Yes.
I'm like, okay, dude.
Please clean
Yeah.
up your weight rack afterwards, gym bros and gym gals alike. I have a
But
little bit more of an in-depth question for you. And this,
Mhm.
I know that, one of the things I think you do so eloquently is you speak to the masses. I was reading, and this is just friend to friend. I kind of want your thoughts on it. So I've always been a proponent of full range of motion, and you can play with tempo. So I know these are kind of more advanced techniques, right? Or even if someone doesn't want to lift heavy initially, they can slow down the eccentric, that kind of thing. I was reading, it was just a couple days ago, actually. I was reading about full range of motion. Like I was saying, like you do, you go on PubMed when you want to be a nerd and you want to learn things. And I was reading about long length partials. So
Oh yeah, I
length
read that one too.
Okay. So how cool is this that the signaling for a long length partial, so for the listener, long length partial. So if you're thinking about a bicep curl, let's say, it's when your bicep is elongated. So the elbow is extended, maybe you're on a bench, so you get a little bit more, stretch or whatever. And then you just do a half rep. So you just come up like maybe 45 degrees instead of the
Mhm.
full 90. And you just keep doing that. That seems to be, at least initially, the meta-analysis that I was reading has an equivalent signal to a full range of motion. So I'll tell you what I've been doing, and I would love to know if you agree, disagree, you have a suggestion. So I'll do my full range of motion stuff. And then when I'm starting to fail, like so when my form is starting to break, I'll be like, okay, now I'll jump into some part, like long length partials. Or I'll alternate. I'll do one full ROM, like one rep that's full range of motion, and then I'll do one long length partial, and then one full long length partial. What do you think about it? Tell me. Let's geek out just for a moment for my dark roast Betties. These are my Betties that want all the details, all the science, all the geek. What do you think about it? What's your thoughts? Are you doing them? Yeah.
So when I was in my early 20s, in personal training before there were personal trainers, and literally it was when Gold's Gym in Venice didn't even have personal trainers. There were like 3 of us there. Now there's like, I think 1,000 personal trainers there. But, this was bro science capital, right? And so everyone would leave and go to this place next door, the Firehouse, for lunch. Everyone had brown rice, broccoli, and chicken breasts. That's what they ate. They had egg white omelets for breakfast. They had and sweet potatoes. They were very specific things. There, by the way, at this gym, now it's changed, but back then they had this little loft with 3 Schwinn Aerodynes. That was the cardio room, a
Oh,
loft
wow.
with
Mm.
3 Schwinn Aerodynes that people would just do when they were cutting at the end for a contest.
Mm.
And so you saw people doing all sorts of different things. And one of the things that always stuck in my mind, and I remember very arrogantly back then, because I was doing my graduate degree in biomechanics. And I was very arrogant. It's like when you don't know much, you think you know everything. And now the
Right.
more I know, I'm like, I know nothing. I'm like,
Yeah.
I know nothing.
Yeah.
And, I remember they would do bicep curls. Like they would have like half a day where all they did were biceps, these bodybuilders. And they would do bicep curls, partials from elongated to midpoint, and then partials, midpoint to higher, so they would do them, and then they do isometrics. They do all of it. And when I was reading that paper, I thought, it makes a ton of sense to do different types of stress to the joint and stress to the muscle, where the muscle's going to go, oh, okay, wait a minute. I have to hold here in an isometric. Like I'd love to see a elongated to 45 where then you actually had to hold. If you think about it, when you're doing an elongated to 45 and not all the way up, the easy part. It's why they did Cybex in the beginning and Kaiser machines is they were changing the range of motion, so it was always hard. When you're at the gym doing anything, whether it's cable or free weight, there's going to be a part of it that's really hard and then a part
Yeah.
of it that's easy. You're
Like the
doing a
squat.
bicep.
There's nothing happening at the top, right?
Right.
You're
It's
just
like that's
standing.
the easy part where you're
Yeah.
showing off. Maybe you do a little pelvic thrust.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
to ice the cake. I don't know. But if you look at like a bicep curl where you do it over the preacher curl where that makes it harder up, but it's still going to be easy at the top. So what if you just did the hardest part and really killed it to failure?
Hmm.
I mean, it makes sense, right? So I've been putting more playing around with things into the workout where I might do just go through my typical like, whatever, and then at the end do just the little hard. And what I'll do in pull-ups is just at the end where I can't do another one, I'll just do a flexed arm hang and just hold that,
Yeah.
right? So, or just a dip, think about like just kind of just moving where I'm not worried about getting, I'm just going to stay up and hold it like slightly flexed for a bit. So like a push-up, what I've been working on is coming down, and this came from yoga, coming down and holding it at the
Right.
bottom for a bit. So I think there's definitely something to this. And I think there's definitely also something to working through a full range of motion. I'll work with the TRX to get full range of motion exercises, especially for squats and things like that I can't do with a bar. But, I think anyone who says they know all of this stuff, like a new study comes out all the time going, "Oh, well, actually isometrics work great." And you're
Right.
like, "Oh, okay." So I
Yeah.
think that the best thing we can do, especially once you get past the first 8 to 12 weeks, where you're really just working with your nervous system, teaching your body how to do this stuff and how to do these movements. I think as we get past that, and especially as you're past the first year, you got to keep changing things up. And so tempo's one, more sets are one, more reps are one. But changing your range of motion and adding in isometrics too, like killer, fantastic.
Aging powerfully. And I always find that I have, I can do those long length. I find it on the hamstring machine because my hamstrings, I don't know if it's just they just cramp like a
Right?
cramp so bad. And so I can't do the full range. And then so if but I do have like 4 or 5 of those long length partials left. I could do
Mm,
5 more of them if I'm just doing the long length partials. So I get a little bit more volume, right? So a little bit more
right.
contraction. I count it as a rep. And then I can still, so that's a form of progressive overload, at least for me.
I mean,
Yeah.
why wouldn't you want to eke out as much as you possibly can eke out? Which you were
Right.
talking about, like at the beginning, I want to be able to pole dance. And I don't even think it was 30 seconds of fame. It was about 10 seconds. I was like, did anyone get the video where within 10 seconds of this, where I felt I looked great, but I'll never know. It's in my mind. I'm a legend in my mind. I ended up injuring my thumb. I had to go get a shot and my hamstring was so cramped.
Wow.
I was like,
From pole
wow,
dancing?
from like 10 seconds of pole. But it just
Wow.
shows you we're so used to, it's why we have to change up and get out of our ruts. It's why I actually go do a HIIT class with all of these 20 and 25-year-olds once a week when I'm home so that they can force me to do different things. It's because we just naturally do it. We do it with our diet, we do it with our exercise. And whereas in diet, I think it's actually pretty good to be in a rut in a way, not so much with exercise, because with exercise, our body is trained to adapt. And so if you want to continue to improve, which we do, you can't be doing the same old stuff because true exercise is your body is adapting and getting stronger to something. So if it's the same old thing, it doesn't have to do that.
Yeah. So if you've been curling or whatever, squatting the same weight for the past 3 or 4 years, that's
Yeah,
not applying some of the principles that you're outlining here.
right.
You brought up diet, which I think is a perfect segue. I want to talk a little bit about diet, and maybe we'll start with protein because I think that this is one of the only macronutrient requirements that change as we age. And I think that when we start in our 40s, it becomes more important, or at least a lot of women start to say, "Hey, you know what? The thing I was doing when I was 25, no longer working at 45. The diet when I wanted to slim down really quickly for insert whatever event here or
Right.
whatever." No longer working, starting to notice changes in my body composition. So we've talked about the muscle piece. We'll come back to NEAT and cardio, but I wanted to talk about diet and protein. What are your thoughts? I think I know your thoughts, but I love the way that you talk about it. So tell me about what you think about protein And what are some of the general verticals when we're thinking about building a plate, when we're thinking about our diet or, the food that we're consuming in our 40s, 50s, and beyond? What do we want to be thinking about?
So I am living by the mantra of eat protein first for a very specific reason. And it's funny, I was doing a lecture in New Orleans and then a bunch of us went out to dinner, and one of the women at the table was the perfect example of the typical, like, 55-year-old, 60-year-old woman. She was skinny fat, she was a walker, she was, eating more plant-based, very low protein, and so, I went through this whole talk and, about eating protein, lifting heavy, and, recovery tools, and so we're sitting at dinner. Now I'm just curious, I'm gonna watch. Keep my mouth shut, try hard, keep my mouth shut. And so, appetizers come to the table, wine to the table, salad, which I find for most people when they're dining out, their salad is really a sundae. Like, if you're sitting down to eat a salad at a restaurant and your salad's got croutons and dried fruit and glazed candy and a sugary dressing, you had 5 calories of arugula and a bunch of sugar and fat. You would have been better off skipping. And so I watched the carby appetizer, then the salad, glass of wine, and she'd ordered eggplant for dinner. And I'm looking at this and I ordered a big steak. So I've got extra because I was going to take it home for breakfast. And so I'm like, listen, I'll share some of my steak with you. She goes, oh, I'm so full. I'm like, were you in the room? Like, anyway, she goes, you're protein shaming me. I go, yes, I am. I'm like, I'm going to sit with you and we're going to have our 4 grams of protein over here. Yes, we are.
Yeah.
But that is why, because I kept hearing from women, I go, okay, it's always made sense to me. Like, the way I like to build a plate is dose your protein based on your body weight. And I think, Stephanie, one of the reasons it's always made more sense to me to dose things based on body weight and height is because I'm 6 feet tall, and so it never fit. Like, a lot of the stuff they said, I'm like, yeah, but I'm 6 feet tall. Like, so I'm not going to have the same protein as you 5'2" person. Right. And so I think that if we start by building with protein first, because here's the thing, and especially if you're eating animal protein and you're eating clean animal protein, and I think one of the big arguments in the vegan plant world is they'll compare a crappy factory animal to, their plant-based diet. I go, you can't do that. You got to compare apples to apples. So pastured, wild, grass-fed. If you're doing that, you're getting healthy fats. So the reality is we could live on that alone if we had to, right? With good hydration.
And we did.
Yeah, and we did. And that's the point. And we did. Like, couldn't live in the wild on solely plants. You would have some nutrient deficiencies, be problematic, but you could live solely on animals. Now, I don't think you should live solely on either one. I think you're best with both, but we need to make sure I have with women eating protein first, because what I find is that if they don't do that, they get too full and then they don't eat what they need. And the great news is if you're eating protein first, better thermic effect from that, as we know, 20 to 30% of the more of a thermic effect from protein than you get from carbs or fat. Fat's negligible, carbs are 5 to 10%. But you get full. You have great satiation, you've got great craving satisfaction, you tend to make better food choices overall. So I always start there. That's the first part of the plate, is that protein first. And if you're going to overeat on anything, overeat on protein. And then I add in non-starchy vegetables. I think 5 to 10 servings of a diversity of those and 2 fruit servings a day. And then we go from there and see what else you need. But that's where I start, and start with the right amount of protein at each meal. And then I go past that. But that's why I've started with eat protein first, is purely because I heard too often I didn't get it in, I got too full.
Yeah. And I find when you have, the eggplant dinner that you're describing with the salad and the wine and the bread and all of that, you're usually hungry 1 to 2 hours later anyway, right? So you will go back into the fridge and you're going to eat more calories. Like, you're not going to be satiated, to your point, for the time that you should after a meal like that and the calories that you consumed.
I think it's that protein leverage hypothesis. I really think that makes a ton of sense. I think of the times when I've gone out to like vegan restaurants in LA, and I always would come out of them feeling like I needed to go eat somewhere. It's like going, I felt bloated, full, and hungry.
Yeah, there's people in Encinitas now that are losing their minds, but we love you.
I know, and I lived there, so let's all take a deep cleansing breath. But, it's not to say that you can't do this. If you are someone who, for a spiritual reason, needs is plant-based, you're just gonna need to and I heard someone say the other day, "You don't actually need to be that good at these things." I go, "I would disagree 100%." Is if you wanna make sure that you're getting what you need in terms of essential amino acids and not overloading with carbs and fat, you're going to have to pay attention, but that can be adding in some plant-based protein powders. I think for all of us, essential amino acids are a good insurance policy. Like, why wouldn't we? You look at sarcopenia as we age, you look at anabolic resistance, you go, why aren't we using essential amino acids, especially with you know, seniors? Like my mother passed last year, but I remember they were like, eat more protein. She goes, I had a Dannon light. I go, all right. Can we just get in some essential amino? Like, how are we going to help here to make sure that you get what you want when your appetite's down so much? So eat protein first, and then use some essential amino acids to make sure that you got everything that you needed here as an easy cover for that. And the
Okay,
other
very
one
good.
is
Yeah.
creatine. Like
Oh,
I
let's talk about creatine. Yeah.
I can't believe I look at the Stephanie and I'm embarrassed to admit that up until 2 years ago, creatine wasn't on my radar at all. And I tried it a couple times, but I still kind of thought of it as a bro thing. I think it is when you look at the things that we need to focus on as we age, creatine, essential amino acids, you know, protein supplementation. I think it's probably most of us do better if we add in a little protein supplementation because it's hard to get enough. Collagen are just obvious ones, along with vitamin D, fish oil, and magnesium. Those are like my let's make sure we get this stuff in. But creatine, holy smokes, who knew? Like,
It's
your
interesting too because the
skin.
the myths that persist around, it's like, "Oh, I'm gonna get water weight." It's like the water weight is in the
Yes, it's
it's
good.
in the muscle. So you're gonna get a pump. Like you're gonna get sort of what you might look like at the end of a session. You're not gonna be holding extra water. Like the water's drawn into the myocytes. So it's not, and sometimes you think, not that I think that we need to be following bodybuilders or physique competitors, but sometimes when you look at some of their habits, im especially when they're dieting down for competitions, like their whole, modus operandi is preserve muscle tissue and make it look full, right? So the day
Right.
that they step on stage, they want to preserve as much muscle tissue as they can while cutting calories. And when they step on stage, tanned and orange and all the things, the muscle needs to look full. I don't think that any of them ever stop taking creatine. Like they are always taking it to make the muscle, and they're doing little things before they get up on stage, little push-ups and banded stuff and whatever.
Right.
But the creatine piece of it, like the chemical piece of it is, the creatine is always there to sort of help make the muscle look full and, swole if that's what you're looking for. So I think that's and talk about the cognitive benefits. I mean, there's so much
I
studies
know, and
around. Yeah.
skin,
Yeah. Yeah.
depression, skin, bones. So here's what I'm doing with it. Because at first I was like, it's you're not gonna get bloated. It's water in your muscles. Use your bioimpedance machine, you'll see.
Mhm.
And because I think there's even a disconnect. Like I go, are you looking at yourself in your mirror? Because I'm looking at you, and what you see and what I see are like we're looking at two different
Yeah,
people.
is this body dysmorphia or is it
Yeah,
the
like
creatine, right? It's like it's probably
wild.
yeah, right.
But what you can do so that this doesn't happen is start with a gram. Go to 2 grams, go to
Mm,
3 grams, like, just
fair.
bump it up, and you'll end up at 3 to 5 grams. And higher end if you're bigger and you're plant-based, right? So, I mean, I take 5 grams. I take 5 grams of that blended with taurine and magnesium.
Oh, I love that. And shout out to just a plug for Mind Body Green. They have a great creatine with taurine in it. They have the taurine integrated into their product, which I really like.
Fabulous, yeah. So I've been like little chemist at home blending all this stuff. But that's one that you will actually feel when you go to the gym, when you start taking it. Like, the things that I notice the most when I go to the gym is that and Mitopure. Those were the 2 that I was like, "I will never not take these."
Mm.
You
And so
know?
what is your protein target now? You said
So
1
I eat a
gram
lot of
per
protein.
yeah.
I feel better. So here's the thing, though. I remember I forget which genetic test it was ages ago, and they go, "Oh, you're just someone who handles protein better." My whole life, I've always felt better eating a high protein diet. The only time when I was briefly in the vegan space, because any diet there was, I was going to try. And I was actually training people at Pritikin Center in Pacific Palisades, which was, eat 10 grams of fat a day. No, it was 10% calories from fat. You could have fish twice a week. So I always take things to extremes. So I was doing a very high carb vegan diet. That was the only time I've had an issue with body fat where I was 25% body fat. I normally sit
Oh,
and
on your frame, that's insane.
I know.
You're
So
very lean. Yeah.
I'm very lean, very muscular. And I literally, when I was in my 20s, I remember I went, my body fat test then was 10%. Totally healthy, totally regular periods, always have been healthy. I am just a little genetic. That is what I've always been, is very, very lean, right? And except for the brief vegan time of a couple years where I finally got so sick, a doctor was like, eat a chicken or I'm hospitalizing you. But my body fat, I remember at the time, went up to 25%. It was a mess, you know?
And so what are you eating now? What is your protein
So
that you
now I weigh about 140 and I get anywhere from, 160, sometimes 180. I mean,
Good.
I
Yeah.
just feel better eating more protein. I generally tell
I'm the
people,
same. I'm the
but I
same.
just,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
sorry, go on.
no, I was gonna say, like, right? And you can look at some of the physique athletes and they'll do like 1.5 grams per pound of body weight and
Mhm.
be fine. So,
I
my
have
insulin's
easily 150
1.5.
to 170 grams a day, easily.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
where are you getting it from? What are your primary sources?
Primary, I would say, is lean ground beef, chicken. I make these salmon cups that my kids love.
What is that? Do
Yeah, so
share.
it's so great. So you just take a salmon fillet, you just
Uh,
cut it up, you put some mustard and some spices in it, and then I take, those seaweed.
those nori wraps.
It's just like a seaweed snack. They're just like big
Yeah.
squares.
Yep.
So I'll cut those into 4, and then I'll take a little cupcake tin and I'll stuff them in, and then I'll put like a little bit of white rice, and then I'll put the 3 or 4, maybe 5 of those salmon pieces, and then it's like a little sushi thing, because
Wow.
I don't know how to roll sushi, so this is like my best attempt at sushi, but then you can control the amount of rice that's in there, and then I make it really high protein. So these like big sort of cubes of salmon, or with these salmon with these seaweed snacks, and they taste great. The
Gosh,
kids,
that's perfect. What a
yeah,
great post-workout.
yeah, yeah. It's great
Yeah.
post workout too. Yeah, I usually prepare them for the kids as an after school snack, and then I'll scarf some down as well. But yeah, it's one of my favorite ways. So those are kind of my favorite ways. The other thing that I like to do when I'm running short on time is a chuck roast. So it's just a chuck roast, very cheap cut of meat, salt, pepper in the oven for 3 hours at 375, and it just turns into the most succulent,
Mm.
wonderful meat, and we just literally pick it apart on some, maybe I'll have something on the like some vegetable sautéed mushrooms or something on the side, but the meat is like the main event.
I will tell you, I love red meat. I feel the best on red meat.
Yeah.
I eat like I could literally eat red meat, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It
Yeah.
just I've always been that way. I've always felt great on it. And when I don't have it, I don't feel good. So
Yeah, I think that we've been talking a little bit about like, you can't get bulky as a woman. It's like near impossible. I think the other myth is like protein is like men, fire, meat. It's like this sort of protein is for guys. It's like the bro science thing. It's like it's not. It's for you too.
yes,
It's for women as well.
you want good skin,
Yeah.
hair, nails, bones, muscle. I mean, everyone talks about bone density, but you know what? It's like bone density is to blood sugar like insulin is to muscle. By the time you have issues with your bones, your muscles have been weak for a while. By the time your blood sugar is going up, you've been insulin resistant. Let's look at the early indicators instead of the lagging indicators. And the early indicator is like, let's look at your grip strength, how many push-ups you can do, right? You know, and get yourself moving again. And you cannot build muscle without protein. You can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and you can do it. I know, a lot of women want to go plant-based. If you are plant-based, you have to focus on where you're going to get the protein from, because if you're going to do it from food alone, and I know I'm going to get attacked for this one, but I just do the math. I love math. Show me in math how you can get enough protein without overloading carbs and fat and calories.
And you
So
can get plant proteins, but then you have to consider the bioavailability of the plant protein. You have to consider the leucine content or the essential amino acids that we've been talking about, which is, notoriously very poor. So it's all, when we're thinking about goals, if your goal is hypertrophy, we need to be thinking about where's the leucine coming from in your diet. And so you're going to need to, I think you can do it as a vegetarian. You're just going to need to consume I think you need to go to the protein powders. Like, I think you're gonna need to
yeah.
go to the soy, which is actually highly usually very bioavailable, so like the soy protein powders, the rice and that I'm not huge fans of, but there's like the pea protein versions and all of that. So I think you have to, as a vegan or vegetarian, be relying at least partially in your diet from the protein powders, which I don't think is a bad thing because
No, I don't think
as
it's a bad thing either. Like
yeah,
everyone talks about processed food. I go, there's processed food and ultra processed food. We must
right.
know the difference
Yeah.
because, it's like use technology where it's great. There's some great processed protein powders that make a ton of sense, just don't have artificial stuff in them. And look at essential amino acids. I think like electrolytes, essential amino acids, and creatine are great things to be including into your program.
Yes,
So
as
that's an
I
easy
take a
cover.
sip of my electrolytes here, my little product placement. Actually, I wanted to ask you about carbohydrates. I've spoken to a lot of people about this, and I've sort of experimented myself and with clients around carbohydrate timing. There are some, like I spoke to Don Layman, who's coming on. He's on the podcast, and his thinking is that carbohydrates, and there's not just him, but he comes to mind where the carbohydrate timing becomes very important. So, for example, as you deplete your muscles in an exercise session, following that session, because you've degraded the muscle protein, you need you need the proteins post workout to sort of help with that reparative process, and also pairing it with carbohydrates to drive up insulin so that muscle can begin to repair. Do you have thoughts on timing of the carbs? I know we've talked about meal timing, so like protein first and then maybe having the potatoes or whatever it is afterwards. Is there an upper carbohydrate limit that you think about with meals? Is there types of carbs that I know you talked about the starchy vegetables and non-starchy vegetables. What are your thoughts around carbs and carb timing?
This is all so interesting. I just went to Dom D'Agostino's Metabolic Health Summit. So it was
Mm.
all keto stuff, right? And they were
Yeah.
showing how keto athletes had high muscle stores of glycogen. I'm like head scratching, I'm like, wait a minute, but they're not high protein, they're high fat. How is this happening?
Yeah.
Back when I was in school, everything was about the magic window where you needed to do something within an hour of working out, right? And so everyone was like slogging down stuff at the gym, making sure they got protein and carbs. It's, gosh, I just don't know which way to go with this. So I'm just going to go. I know what I do now because I see the research both ways. So I go, how do we unpack this? And, and I think in this too, we could also go fasted workout or non-fasted
Oh,
workout.
that was my next question was fasting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
let's like unpack all the food, all the nutrition and exercise. So fasted versus non-fasted workouts. And so what's the premise with a fasted workout? A fasted workout premise is if you work out fasted, you'll burn more fat. Okay. But what we're looking at is, are you going to burn more body fat overall during the day? Because that's what you're really looking at. It's like keto. You're teaching your body to burn fat. I go, all right, but are you burning body fat or dietary fat? Because that's a big difference. Like if you're drinking the, fat coffee, but you're just burning that fat, that does not help your belly fat, right? So the first way I look at this, let's talk about fasted workouts first. It is not how many calories you burn from fat during a workout. It's being at the end of the day, do you have a deficit so that your body is now using stored body fat for fuel? And do you have a deficit with insulin sensitivity so it can access that stored fat for fuel and not break down muscle? And do you have enough muscle? Do you have enough protein in your diet and resistance training to have muscle protein synthesis going on so you're holding on to or building muscle as you're dropping fat? Because while you can do recomposition, build muscle, burn fat, my husband literally dropped 27 pounds of fat and put on 24 pounds of muscle in about 8 months. I mean, you can do it. You have to make sure that you are optimizing protein. And that's where I think you go above that 1 gram per pound of target body weight and that you're in a caloric deficit. And that's where I think doing a rotating caloric deficit, what Bill Campbell talks about, that 5-2 is better and reduces metabolic adaptation. So for me, when I look at fasted workouts, I know that if I'm getting up in the morning going for a walk, maybe a rucking walk or something, or doing some cardio, I'm fine. But if I want to go kick it in the weight room, I'm way better getting up, being able to work out about 3 hours after I woke up, and getting in a meal beforehand. Can I always do that? No. Sometimes I'm on the road. The only time I can work out is 30 minutes after I wake up. I'm gonna go fasted, but I won't be able to work out as hard, right? So I will take with me, when I do that, I take with me a big ass thing of a big jug of creatine and taurine and essential amino acids and electrolytes and collagen. I take that with me to the gym. So if I
Great.
can't take anything. Now, I think this is really something for someone to look at and go, how well do you work out fasted? If you can work out as hard as you can unfasted, then it doesn't matter. But if you're like most people, I find that you work out better if you've had something.
My performance totally suffers.
Oh my God, it tanks. It
Yeah.
tanks. So then, then we have to look at, okay, well, if you ate beforehand, now you've got some essential amino acids on board that can help you with muscle protein synthesis. But how long ago did you eat? And how fast, was it whey protein that breaks down quickly, or was it something else that's a slow releasing protein? And that would matter. So since that's a lot to think about, why wouldn't we just, ideally, in my perfect world, you'd wake up, you'd have your morning routine, you'd have breakfast about, hour and a half after waking, 2 hours, hour or so after that, you'd be able to go to the gym, then you work out hard, then you come home, and then an hour or so after that, you'd have a protein and carb meal, but not a ton of fiber. And I mean, in your real perfect food for that, you're eating a lower fiber carb, right? And protein meal with not a lot of fat. So that would be your more perfect type of thing. I think that if we make this too hard, people won't do it. So
Right.
if we can just say, hey, ideally, if you can, after you work out, get in some protein and carbs, it's going to be probably better for you.
And
Is
if
it
you can't follow that ideal scenario, still do something. Do what you can, right?
Yeah,
Like
do what you
I can't
can.
follow that. I work out in the morning. It's the only time I have. So I can't wait an hour and a half to 2 hours. I'm usually there, call it 45 to an hour after I've woken up. I'm getting dressed,
Yeah.
driving there, blah, blah, putting on my moisturizer, blah, blah, blah. But I will eat before. So I will still I have steel cut oats that I've made before. I'll put in some protein powder, mix it up with some hot water. That's my pre-workout. That's what I eat prior to working out, because if I don't, I just I just I just tank. I just tank.
Yeah.
I don't have it in me to, especially if it's leg day, I don't have what it takes to work through the program in the way that I want.
And that is what's the most important. The quality of the workout is the most important thing.
Mm.
Don't get too bogged down in burning fat during the workout, because the reality is, if you're doing an intense workout, you're burning a lot of glycogen and fat. You're going to go back and forth on fuel sources. You're never just predominantly burning one fuel source, unless you're like sitting very calmly, no stress whatsoever.
Right.
Maybe you're burning all fat. But the reality is, we're always kind of fluctuating between burning fat, burning carbs, doing phosphocreatine if we're really pushing it. So, the goal really at your workout is to burn more carbs and to deplete those glycogen stores, and then to come back and refuel them. So this whole thing of like, do this so you burn more fat, it's like, it doesn't matter. That's not going to mean you lost more fat that day, because if you burn more fat in that workout, but you ate more calories than you needed that day, you overate, you're not going to end up with fat loss.
Yeah. Yeah, the way that I like to counsel women, especially I remember I once posted just like a funny meme about like needing to eat before. I can't remember what it was. It was a Star Wars meme. And people were like, but I can't eat. I'm part of the 4 a.m. club. I'm part of the 5 a.m. club. It's like, all right. So on the weekend, when maybe your timing is you have a little less constraint, try to go to the gym an hour later and eat something, and just compare that to when you're working up fasted at 4 a.m. And if it's the exact same thing, then fine, like do what makes you feel great. But I would say, for the most part, people are going to perform better at the gym, which is, I'm in 100% agreement. That is the main point of going to the
Mhm.
gym. It's not to half-ass it, ladies. We want
Right.
our full ass in there. We want
Yeah,
to be
I
doing it,
remember
you know? We
the
wanna be
2
do Yeah, sorry.
yeah, you said that, and I keep thinking of this one gym where I'd walk down, and one side was cardio, and one side was the gym, and you could walk down the corridor and glass see either side, and one woman was on the elliptical doing
Yeah.
a crossword puzzle.
Oh
I'm
gosh.
like,
I mean,
just
no.
why I guess it's better than being at home. But the other thing I think in your situation that could be super helpful is to have that, the essential amino acid blend, throw that in with your, creatine,
Yeah.
taurine,
Yeah, I have the
electrolytes.
creatine, I have collagen because that's when that's just my cue. There's no reason why I take collagen for working out, but I just put it in there because I remember to, and it's vanilla flavored, and I like it with my water. But yeah, putting in some EAAs would be a good
Yeah,
idea
they
there as
don't
well.
taste that awesome,
Yeah,
but, you know, because essential amino acids don't taste good, but so they have to mask them. But I think that could be a way to solve that. And I guess the big question for someone is, how do I get the most out of my workout, and what do I need to do that? And how do you just got to make this work for you. And there is no one way to pull it off. So ultimately, we just have to figure out, some people absolutely cannot eat and go
yeah,
work out. They just
yep,
can't do it. So
yeah. What is your I know we've been talking about power and burst training, so kind of like your zone 6. What are your thoughts on zone 2 for a postmenopausal, perimenopausal, postmenopausal woman, like that steady state? So we've been talking about a little bit about it with rucking and walking, which I think is such an underrated. I love walking, I love rucking. But what are your thoughts in terms of, you mentioned, I think I'm paraphrasing you where you said like 150 minutes a week isn't going to cut it, which is very true. I mean, I work out 5 to 6 days a week just on weights alone. What is your thinking around low intensity, steady state cardio? Do we need it? Do we not need as much of it as our male counterparts? Is it something that we want to be thinking about, or do we want to be pushing that lactate threshold? What do you think?
I would love to put this in order of priority and then step people into adding more and more and more.
Sure.
And just, here's the thing, do what you can do and celebrate you for doing that. Right. And then if you can add more, add more. And I always like to kind of let's start where we can start and build on that. And so when we think of metabolism, you have your resting metabolic rate, which the really only way we can shift that resting metabolic rate is make sure that we've got estrogen on board, A, and B, muscle. So thyroid, estrogen, and muscle are going to be the things that will shift as we age, but we can override them with hormone replacement therapy and holding onto or building muscle. So super important, right? Then we have the thermic effect of food. So if we are eating protein first, we're maximizing that area. And then we have activity. Activity broken out into exercise and non-exercise, right? I think that we've got to focus first on getting in that movement all throughout the day, because if you look at one of the things that happens is, if we start to do caloric restriction, is people tend to start to move less, or if we
Yeah.
start to exercise, we tend to move less. And so what you don't want to do is compensate for going out and working out by sitting on your butt the whole time. And I noticed this the other day, Stephanie, because I went to this really hard hit class and I came home from this thing and I'm like, just wanted to sit around. And I'm like, no, you don't either. You did not get enough, because so we will do that. That's why I like to get one thing on board at a time, and getting used to making sure you have that movement in. Once you get that movement in, you could effectively get yourself into that breathy place. That's what I call zone 2. It reminds me of the old long, slow distance. And when I was in grad school, they were like, if you can't do at least 30 minutes of cardio, don't even bother. It's a waste. I go, well, how many people did that hurt? Like, that's ridiculous.
Mhm.
It all counts. Going up and down the steps counts. Walking around the block with the dog counts. It all counts. But if we could say, okay, let's decide 3 days a week, we're going to either go walk hills, we're going to ruck, we're going to do something to add the intensity into that movement. Cool. Then let's add in the resistance training. Each body part gets at least twice a week, 3 times better. Then add in that yoga piece. Then let's add in some power moves, which could end up, it's going to end up being high intensity interval training, however you do it. That would be great, twice a week. I think for like, if we can get to that, it may take you a year to get to that. It doesn't matter. You know, the fact is you're getting one thing in and that becomes the new way of being. And if you have trouble getting that to be your new way of being, find people who are already doing it and go hang with them. One of the easiest ways to make sure that you get fitter is to find fitter friends, right? And hang with them. And so I think that's the way to pull it off. If I had to prioritize, I'm going to prioritize activity over everything else and then resistance training over it as the next most important thing. And then, I'm not as concerned for women on zone 2 if you're doing that movement 3 days a week with some, because it basically is. I'm more concerned about you'll keep your VO2 max up, which is why you want that zone 2 by doing resistance training and by doing HIIT training.
And the power stuff. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll keep all of that in there. But I also listen to a lot of these exercise prescriptions and I go, okay, but a human has to actually do that. Like someone has to actually be willing to do this. How do we create a program that will make someone actually want to do this? And how do we start? And I never like to throw everything at someone because I know they'll just kind of curl up in a fetal position and do nothing. So how do we start with one thing you'll start to have a win from? And if all that was you start with just, let's figure out how much protein's perfect for your target body weight, and let's divide that throughout your day, and let's get you eating protein first and make sure you've got that dialed. Good, you've got that dialed. Let's get your activity going. Oh, you've got your activity going. Let's add some speed, some intensity 3 days a week. Okay, good. Let's start the resistance. Like, let's just build and build and build. Oh, now you want to focus on losing some body fat. Okay, let's really do a macro audit and see what we need to do. And I think doing a macro audit, like that's how I got Tim to start to drop the body fat, was he was like, oh, those Siete chips that I just ate half the bag of. And with all that hummus and the cashews and like, too much healthy food's unhealthy.
Right. And I think it's important to, we've been talking this entire conversation around how we can improve our body composition, how we can improve our lean muscle tissue, how we can reduce fat. And I think that in a way, I'm very happy that we're talking about this because a couple of years ago, you could not
Oh,
talk
no.
about this at all. It was like you were fat shaming. I actually had someone declined to come on the show. He had booked in whatever because he thought that I was fat because we were talking about something separate. It was like COVID and metabolic health, and I was like, well, that is a really big predictor. And he's like, that's fat shaming, and then canceled, didn't want to come on the show. And I was like, all
Wow.
right.
When did
So
science become, this is,
yeah,
it's,
he's a prominent scientist too. So whatever,
wow.
I'll tell you who it is when we stop recording.
This is not fair
Yeah.
though to people to
Yeah.
not give, like, then you can make the decision you want to make. But I am, and I said this before and I was like, oh, I'll probably get some bullets for this, but I don't care anymore because I'm not going to do something that's not fair and that's misinformation out there. And no, you can't be healthy at any size. And while calories count, you've got to factor in where they come from. You can't do caloric restriction on pizza and Snickers and think you're going to be metabolically healthy. If you want to be metabolically healthy, if you're looking at weight loss, well, you want to be metabolically healthy so you can lose fat and hold on to muscle. And if with less than 7% of the population now metabolically healthy, we've got to be able to tackle things that are sensitive. No one's saying, shaming you. We're trying to look at this and go, with this information, how do we help you get into the best metabolic health you can so that you can live the life that you want to live?
Right. There's nothing wrong with that
There's
message.
nothing wrong about that. There's something
Yeah.
wrong about giving people information that's not correct, that's setting them up for cancer, heart disease, diabetes.
And delusion. I mean, and that's like, can we just also delusion? Like you can't, if you have doctors that are telling you, no, that's fine. You are perfectly healthy when their triglycerides are out of whack, their LDLs are out of whack, their body, their BMI, although it is an imperfect measurement, is telling us that you're morbidly obese. It is a delusion. And it's malpractice to say to somebody, yes, you're healthy when they're not, because that is going to direct more of their decisions because they're not going to stop eating the Siete chips. They're not going to stop eating the hummus and the cashews and all the things because they don't think that there's a problem that needs to be solved.
Right. So I think the real takeaway here is you knowledge gives you information. Then you have information that if you put into action, can actually change things. And what we have to do is destigmatize things like getting on a scale. And I absolutely can't believe in this, in 2024, we still use a scale and we don't unpack what that weight's made up of. Like, could you imagine looking at cholesterol that way? It would make
Right.
no sense.
Right.
So, now we have all of this information. Let's unpack it and then look at your goals, your lifestyle, your health history, your genetics, and go, okay, how do we create a program that's going to work well with all of that? It's nothing to do with shaming or anything else. It's like, how do we create the ideal program and walk you through it step by step so that you can actually make these changes and they just become who you are. Like now you're a person who always gets their 8 to 12,000 steps in. Okay, now you're a person who goes to the gym. Now you're a person who eats protein first. Now you're a person who makes sure they hydrate each day. It just becomes who you are. It's not what you think about anymore, right? Like you don't have to think about, okay, I need to go to the gym today. You go to the gym. It's who you are. It's what you
Right.
do.
That's great. That's such a powerful reframe. And I think, this leads me to sort of one of my final questions around weight loss drugs, because we're seeing a lot of these GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy and all of this. And I have some thoughts on it. It's a bit nuanced. I would love for you to comment on why or why not these drugs may be a good, how can we say, gateway? Like gateway drug? Could they be a gateway drug to a healthier life? Like giving people some, like, tell me what you think about Ozempic.
I have some
Like,
definite opinions on all
yeah,
of this.
yeah.
First of all, I think we're asking the wrong question. And to me, what's fascinating about these drugs is, okay, so why are they working so well? What's going on here? What is the lesson from this? Because part of it's satiety, but part of it's insulin sensitivity, part of it's in the small intestine, part of it's in the brain. What's going on? And can we do this without the drug, or is the drug needed? If you've now got 80% of the population overweight or obese, and you have something that can help move the needle when nothing else has, I think it's mean to not offer it,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
However, what are the big problems that we see with the drugs? There's two things, and and then I'm going to tell you about some non-drug alternatives that work amazingly well, which are so exciting. The first one is you lose muscle mass. Well, any poorly designed diet is going to cause muscle mass loss. So when you look at it, you go, why are they losing muscle mass? Well, because they're insulin resistant and then they're not focusing on protein and resistance training. So anytime you put someone on a caloric restriction without optimal protein and resistance training, you're going to lose 25 to 30% of muscle. We know that. So it's not the drug, it's the diet and exercise problem. So that's the first part of it. And the second part is that, well, you'll need to be on it for life. Well, actually, there's some interesting stuff coming out that says otherwise, and there's other things you can do. I think we're using them wrong. I love what Dr. Tina Moore's been teaching about microdosing this. I started using it with my son because of the neuroregenerative. There's cardioregenerative, neuroregenerative, kidney regenerative. There's stuff with osteoarthritis, osteoporosis. There's a lot
Well,
more.
because we make GLP-1. This is this is
Yes.
an endogenous compound that we have the capacity to make as well. Yeah.
Right. So the question is, why are we not making where is this disconnect coming from? I would argue it's ultra processed foods that are built to be low protein to trigger the protein leverage hypothesis to make you overeat, right? That is creating this problem. GLP-1 raises when you eat, and especially from protein and fiber. But now we've really trashed our gut microbiome. We've lost the satiety signaling due to the ultra processed foods. So what if, like, I think the first line of defense before the drug would be to try two things that I'm amazed these things are not like more widespread right now, especially because they cost a fraction of what the medication costs. One of them is RX sugar, allulose. Allulose raises GLP-1. Now, you have to do about 0.1 to 0.4 grams per kilogram of body weight. So it's about 10 to 15 grams of allulose before a meal, and actually it will drop your blood sugar in response to the meal. Like Dom D'Agostino did a little thing using one of RX Sugar Swelty snacks before a meal. You can do that, eat a candy bar, drop your blood sugar. Actually, it wasn't him. It was another guy was showing he was a diabetic. taking swelthy snacks, ate a candy bar, showed how it dropped blood sugar, because allulose will cause a little insulin release, just like GLP-1 will, right? Which people, like, you want insulin to get released in response to food to drive nutrients into cells and then come back down. So that's the first one, is allulose, and I've actually been using allulose syrup. So my problem is I don't really like sweet. Now, it's not super sweet. Allulose is a rare sugar. It doesn't raise insulin, doesn't raise blood sugar. It actually lowers blood sugar and raises GLP-1. But I've been using it in the morning. I take this syrup and pour it onto either my smoothie or Greek-style yogurt to raise GLP-1. The other thing that you can do is use something called CaloCurb. New Zealand started studying this hops formula 10 years ago. They've invested $30 million in it, and it will raise GLP-1 for like 4 hours. And they are using it to titrate people off the drug. Now, in my perfect world, we would start someone with replacing all sweeteners with allulose, right? And start using that before the meal. There's a little swelthy stick, this flavor thing that you can have about 10 grams before a meal. You take 2 calocurbs before a meal and see if that can do enough for you. And I think for a lot of people, it probably could. And if that wasn't enough, then start low dose, microdosing of the injection with good protein quality and fiber and resistance training. And then be able to cycle back off of it, or cycle it down to maybe every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. But I look at it and go, all right, so let's say in the worst case, you found out you needed to use this drug. You are obese, you're 50 pounds overweight, you're insulin resistant. You are now have high risk factor. So your VO2 is low, you can't, max is low, you can't really move much. You've got osteoarthritis, you've got a lot of inflammation, high cardiovascular risk factors, et cetera. And nothing's working. You're weight loss resistant, blah, blah, blah. You use Ozempic or Mounjaro, and you finally are able to get the weight off. You're on a protein optimized diet with resistance training. You actually maintain muscles, you lose fat. And I know enough people who've done this, so I can tell you, you can do it. And you get close to where you want to be. You get down to cycling that drug. So you're doing a fraction of what you need, microdosing it every other week. That helps you get to a place where you can maintain your weight, and you have to use that for life. I would argue you're better off. I'd argue, so what? You'd either use that drug for life, or you're going to be on blood pressure, cholesterol, like all these other medications. Which is worse? One, you just improved your metabolic health, became insulin sensitive, lost that body fat, held on to or put on muscle. You can move now. You're active. You're athletic. You've actually had some benefits from the drug. If you look at the papers that Tina Moore has them on her site about the improvements in cardiovascular health, brain health. That's why we're using it for my son, the neurodegenerative. Or you're on these other medications for life that are just band-aiding all the problems that you have. They haven't fixed anything. So I can't understand the argument. I can't understand all the shaming and hate and all the stuff around this drug. I do not get it. What am I missing?
No, I'm in a complete agreement with you. And I think that sometimes you need just a quick win. Like, you just need to see a sign, that something is working, which is, I've always said the diet and the interventions that you follow when you're metabolically unhealthy or you're sick is not going to be the same thing that you
Right.
follow when you're healthy. So get on, if you need it, some of the protocols that you've outlined, I think are fantastic. It's part of the reason, Love Dom and his wife Chilla, this is part of the reason why I like the ketogenic diet. It's going to help with improving insulin sensitivity initially, and it gives you a quick win. You drop the weight really quickly.
Right.
And then it's a big motivator. You get this dopamine hit, and you're like, all right, I'm in, like, I'm going to commit. And sometimes it's that psychological part of trying to rework your body composition. Like, we've all heard, like, you got to do this, and here's the zone 2, and here's the resistance training. Like, we're hearing all of these messages, but it's the buy-in. It's the buy-in that I think that people, well, what if it doesn't work for me? But if you see it working, you're going to be, the likelihood of you following through is much higher. Yeah.
Doing this for 40 years, I've worked with a lot of obese and morbidly obese people. And, there's this whole idea out there that they're, undisciplined and I'm like, I couldn't see anything further than the truth. but you have someone who's metabolically disadvantaged at this moment, and you have something that can help them get out of the metabolic hole, why wouldn't you use that tool
Yeah.
responsibly?
Beautifully said. We got to get together in person, friend.
I know, man. When are we going to do that?
Yeah, I'll tell
And
you a
when?
couple times that I'm going to be up in your neck of the woods soon. But if people want to find out more about you, like what's next for you, tell like projects that you're working on, where people can find you, all the places.
Lots of fun things because I've got a book I'm working on. I actually pushed it out a year because I'm going to do a beta test with a bunch of people.
Oh,
So
fun.
yes, so that is all around powerful aging, name TBD. I do a fun Eat Protein First 7-day challenge. That's where I've heard the craziest results of like satiety and satisfaction. So that's all at jjvirgin.com. And of course, Well Beyond 40 that you've been a guest of. And we are just putting, I am focused on everything around powerful aging. So that is my pure focus now is what do we need to do mindset wise, recovery wise, nutrition wise, exercise wise to just be able to be amazing at 70, 80, 90. And it's so interesting, Stephanie, because the older I get, the older old is. Like now old is 80 to me.
Yeah, exactly. 40, I'm 46 now. It's like 46 used to be my scary age. And I'm like, well, it's not scary. It's fine.
Why would that be scary? That's like,
well, when you're 20, you're like,
oh,
oh
yeah.
God, it'd be really scary being in your 40s. And now I'm like, actually, this is the best thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Really scary is not being in your 40s or 50s.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Well
what's scary.
said.
Like, I love the aging is a privilege.
Yeah.
It really is. But aging well, that is something that, is a choice. And I watched two parents, one aged well and one, blew out. And it was absolutely their lifestyle choices. So I am choosing wisely.
Wonderful. JJ, you're such a inspiration to me. You've helped me so much in my own career, my own mindset, all the things, I said briefly at the beginning, you are, a friend, but also a mentor. You've been an example to me of what's possible. So thank you so much for coming on today. And I hope to see you soon for an arm wrestle.
Thank you. Yes.